Serikbay Ospanov takes a special place in Kazakh poetry. He's the winner of the Alash International Literature Award, the author of more than 40 books including 30 poetry. He devoted many years to study the life and remaining legacy of great enlightener Ybyrai Altynsarin. In addition, Serikbay Ospanov is a skilled craftsman. He masters the skill of woodworking. You have written more than 200 poems that have become songs. Most of them are very popular today. Do you have any secret of writing poetry for songs? The poetic lyrics should form the song. The number of syllables should be equal. If you started with 11, you must finish accordingly with 11 syllables. Therefore, when critics and experts speak about poets, they always say that true lyrics require a melody. When I worked in the publishing house Joly, many poets came to us and we corrected their syllables. You are now talking about the harmony of syllable and rhythm, and what should be the content of poetry. Songs written by someone's order are mostly not pure poetry, because an author is limited. He cannot go beyond the frames determined by the customer. And if the melody is written for a verse, written from the heart, then it remains pure poetry, which retains its value. And such a song, as a rule, has a good meaning and content. In ancient times, poets wrote their poems, they composed the melody themselves and sang them themselves. And for this reason, it's impossible to find any flaws in their songs. These are full-fledged, beautiful compositions. And now, one writes lyrics, the second melody. As a result, the performer is driven into a certain framework from which he cannot step to the side. That's why some modern songs are completely incoherent. For example, one part of the song is written in 11 syllables, the other is already in 15, the rest are composed of 12. The lack of harmony is evident, hence the poor quality. To date, the songs that are written by some young composers are in fact not songs. I don't even know how to call them. Why do we increasingly come across this? This is all imitation. Imitation of foreign songs. Today there is no thorough check as it was before. For example, special experts worked in our time on Kazakh radio, on our television. I checked the lyrics of the songs that have been on the air for 15 years. The Arts Council was to carefully consider all the compositions. We should not have allowed those songs that did not meet the high requirements to be broadcasted. And also the reason is in a bad taste. Composers and musicians should have good taste, because high song art eventually becomes part of the national heritage. All songs that have come down to us had been carefully selected. Probably in the old days there were bad songs. After all, even Abai said, not every whistle is a good song. But the best ones have reached us, as they say now, golden hits, pearls of previous generations. And songs with poor content and bad melody were forgotten. If you analyze old Kazakh songs, it becomes even more obvious that each of them literally blooms. For example, composer Mukhtar Sadibekov, the author of the song Shili Ozen. That means river overgrown with chi grass. He wrote approximately 60 songs, and almost all of them never became popular. They are not sung. But we very well know his song Shili Ozen, because there are elements of Kazakh folk art in this song. In general, we should not move away from folk traditions and folk manner of performance. We should always come back to this. Today many people want to be more fashionable, and probably this is good. Of course, everyone is always in search of novelty, but in the end it's not always good songs. Then again, we not forget our koneron, gracious sound. We are now moving away from the gracious voice of our own. But it is precisely such a voice that affects the human body and his soul. But we are moving away from the step-low timbre. This is all due to the popularity of pop and also a variation of the dombra strings. Previously, the dombra strings were made of sheep veins, and no matter how you twisted it, it made a pleasant low sound. But not as thin as it is now, and if one started to stretch it, then it was just torn. In general, all symphonies based on the originals of Kazakh folk songs are beautiful. They just fascinate your soul. All previously created operas and modern operas have not yet found a response in the heart of the Kazakhs. They are a bit complicated. They are absolutely understandable for musicians and for those who know a lot about music, but for most people they are still difficult. That's why we should not move away from the Kazakh melody. Although a bit, albeit slightly, we must add elements of our original culture. What is the power of a song? Mainly it is sincerity. In fact, when a song comes from the heart, from the depth of the soul, it finds responses in the hearts of people. Modern noise and crash, bits don't suit us. But it seems now some listeners are used to all this. For example, playing dombra on the scene is probably necessary. But it is impossible to knock on the dombra during the play. One needs to treat the dombra as gently as possible, so that the melody emanating from it envelopes the listeners with its sound.
Домбыраны мейлінше жанында баурайтын қылып тарту керек. Тартып отырған күйің не туралы? Соны білу керек.
Әрбір өлеңнің шумағы әнге сұранып тұру керек деп.
At the beginning of the conversation, you said that every good verse always asks itself to become a song. Many of your colleagues also hold this view. But what exactly is your secret?
Жоқ, бұнда бірнеше рет қайталап жазу керек дейді. Сөздің жақсы болуы үшін сен әнді жаныңа кіргізуің керек өзіңе.
There is no secret. Sometimes you have to rewrite many times. To make poems good, they must be felt with a soul. We must realize that. And only this is how wonderful verses come out. Earlier, the Kazakhs did not read poetry. There was no expressive reading. For example, people read letters triangle that came during the war with a melody. Kazakhs are people with a poetic soul. Kazakhs sang any verse with a dombra, and it was more accessible to the people. For example, Ahmet Baytursunov, Mirza Kibdelatov were not going to become Akins, but they sang so that their words were clear to the people. They conveyed their thoughts in verse and music. They knew that poetry has many roles and many functions, one of which is a tool for fighting.
Халыққа қалай жетімді болады, халыққа қалай жетеді дегеннен бар өлеңмен айтқан. Олар өлеңнің атқаратын қызметі санаулы, функциясы көп. Олардың өлең құрал бір жағынан. Мына ақындардың жазғандары күрес құралы. Сол есебінде жазған.
Сіз жазған әндердің әйгілісі Сағындым Алматымда.
Sagındım Almatım'da, Missing Almaty is one of your popular songs. It was performed by Altynbek Korazbayev, Makbal Junusova, then the Muzart Band. What is the success of this song?
Ең біріншіден кереметтігі оның әннің жақсылығы. Ән өте жақсы. Екіншіден бұның кереметтігі бұл туған жерді сағыну, елді сағыну, Алматыны сағыну, қар жағында елді сағыну. Сондықтан бұның кезінде бүкіл осы Қазақстандағы.
First, in its excellent quality, it is very good. Secondly, the fact that it contains the thought of longing for one's native land, for one's own country, for Almaty. It implies melancholy. Most of the Kazakh youth studied in Almaty, then returned to their homes. Therefore, the song found responses in their hearts and all admired it. Thirdly, Kazakhs abroad who miss their homeland and are waiting for the moment when they can touch their native land and taste the air of their native expanses, listened to this song and began to sing it, missing their native land. In addition, such wonderful performers as Makpal Junusova, the Muzart Band, and by the way, Valentina Tolkunova performed it. Perfectly performed. As a result, the song became very popular.
Жанға орын сайын жақындатып, жан жүрегін баурап алды. Осыдан болу керек, осыдан барып, жаңа ән кеңірек тарап кетті. Енді бұның тарихы былай ғой. Сол 1974 жылы Қазақ радиосы Алтыбақан деген хабар ұйымдастырып, соған жер-жерден өнерпаздарды шақырды. Сол Жамбыл облысынан 3 жігіт келді, трио.
I remember its history. In 1974, the Kazakh radio launched Altybakan program, which invited talented people from all suburbs. 3 young men came from the Jambal region, a trio. They took part in the concert, performed well, stayed for the qualifying concert. And it turned out that they had their own melody, a new one, which they themselves composed and called Sagandim Almatimde. It was the melody of Altynbek Korasbayev. Then they came to the Kazakh radio, where composer Anwar Bekjan, Altynbek's countryman, worked, and then Altynbek asked Anwar if he had anyone in mind who would write poems for their melody. And then Anwar replied that they had such an editor, Serikbay Ospanov. So we met. I wrote a verse for them quickly, in 10-15 minutes. The song was born very easily. And in the evening they went to the concert and sang it for the first time. At that time it was Lenin's Palace, now renamed to the Palace of the Republic. That's where it sounded for the first time. These 3 guys have performed it for the first time. In one of your interviews, you said, "I still feel ashamed of being a poet." Why? I sometimes wonder at some poets. They write first, member of Kazakhstan Union of Writers, and only then the poet. Before the member should be poet. That is, the poet, a member of Kazakhstan Union of Writers. Because if he had not been a poet, he would not have become a member of Kazakhstan's Union of Writers. This is the first. Secondly, there is no higher rank than a poet. Now they add other descriptions to the word poet, like a talented poet, an eminent poet, and so on. Academician Serik Kirabayev said about this once, "After you call someone a poet, you don't need to add anything." In my opinion, the title of the poet is already a high honor, the highest title. I think it is not necessary to say that I am a poet. We are poets, because I am a poet. I am a poet, and similar statements seem superfluous to me. Anyone can say, I am a geologist, I'm an engineer, but poetry is not a specialty. Let others call you a poet. What is your poetic style? The most difficult thing in poetry is to find own style of writing, your peculiarity. I can't say that I began to write in a special way at once. For example, Temikhan Medvedbekov looked for own style for a long time. He tried. Downtown Stambekov was looking for himself and eventually found his feature. Recently, one critic wrote about the best poet, and the name of Temikhan Medvedbekov was written there. He has his own particular, recognizable style. He does not write in his own way, he brings a new format that is peculiar only to him. Others cannot write like that.
Оны басқалар жазса олай болмайды. Мен мынау 50-ден асқасын тіпті осы мынау 60-ға жақындағанда ғана таптым мен өзімнің өнімді. Басқаша мүлде.
I found my own style only after reaching 50, closer to 60 years. It changed absolutely. I tend to transmit through nature. For example, here a small tree grows and it seems that a tree is holding on to the ground only when its roots are visible. In general, the roots are not only for growth, but also in order to stand firmly on its feet. For example, a poplar is a very strong tree, but what causes a poplar to make noise and sway? Leaves. When you read these lines, you imagine a person who is beautiful, restrained, strong like a stone and hard as iron. But what could make such a person cry? These are his leaves and stems, his children. And if you have bad children, weak, then any person can break. We see it. I write about nature, but connected with human life. For example, birch. We also call it dancing birch. But this is not a dancing birch, It is an unhappy birch. Because it grows alone, if the sun is on one side, it turns in that direction. If on the other side, it turns to it again. It looks around, and when the wind blows, the blizzard, the storm hits, it breaks and curls again. Therefore, it is curved. Why does a tree grow straight? When many trees grow, for example pines, they grow smoothly because the sun comes out from above and they tend upwards.
Қалың ағаш өскен жерде, қарағайлар өскен жерде түк өседі, өйткені күн төбеден шығады. Төбеден қарай соған ұмтылады.
Бірден оқығанда
There are poems that are difficult to understand at once. Should poetry be understandable?
Түсінікті болу керек. Кез келген өлең қарапайым оқушыға түсінікті болу керек.
Absolutely. Any poem should be clear to an ordinary reader. Serikbay Ospanov wrote several books about it, and he also published a collection of critical articles about his contemporaries. And his main idea is that any poem must be accessible and understandable to the people. And now, there are a lot of incomprehensible poems. The poem has no specific recipe. People write what they want, but no matter how the poet writes, his poems must be understandable, close to the soul of the reader. They must penetrate his heart. This is how in the days of Pushkin many other poets put together many forms of poetry. There were also those who were chasing diversity. Many then published books, and they were popular, wonderful poets of their time. But they remained in the past. But Pushkin passed through the centuries and now he is still relevant, because his poems reflect the soul of the people. Kazakhs used to have few short poems, quatrains. Great poems and epic narratives were popular. Short poems began to appear later. But in general, if I advise something to today's poets, it is not to write bad poems. When you are young, you need to write a lot of poems, but you need to give only the best to the press. Some disappoint their readers. You cannot do that. Poetry is, after all, a very difficult thing. It is difficult to produce poetry every day. Let's interrupt our conversation and watch a brief video. Serikbay Ospanov is engaged in both poetry and science. A special section of his activity is the study of the personality, worldview, creativity, environment, and the mysterious death of Ybyrai Altynsarin. Works that shed light on the creative heritage of the great enlightener in the field of language, religion and upbringing do not leave anyone indifferent. During the Union, many works were written about Ybyrai Altynsarin, but still a lot was left in the shade. Basically, information about him was repeated one after another, and Serikbay Ospanov revealed Ybyrai from all sides in his scientific works. Ahmet Baytursinov, Ybyrai Altynsarin are those people who still do not lose their importance, and the legacies left by them require special research. Creativity requires total commitment, and if this or that work has no thought, does not motivate a person, if it does not spiritually enrich him, then what is the use of it, says Serikbay Ospanov. He is always in search of self-development. In addition to the great works, he also reads the poetry of young poets.
Ақын жарасқан бір айтқан жақсы сөз бар. Соғыстан соң туғандар деп айтқан бір жақсы сөз тіркесі бар. Соғыстан кейінгі жағдай өте ауыр болды.
The poet Jaraskan Abdrashov has one good expression: born after the war. After the war, the situation was very difficult. All was diversified and widely reflected in all the works and poetry of the generation born after the war. This can be clearly traced in the works of Serikbay Ospanov. I can safely say that he is a poet who formed his own special author's style in Kazakh literature and poetry.
Ақын деп батыл айта аламыз.
Сіз ағаштан түйін түйген кезде
What are you doing wood processing for?
Бірінші сұлулығын, бәрін табиғаттан үйренеді ғой адам.
Firstly, it is beautiful. A man, after all, is learning from nature, and nature itself is both a master and a sculptor. There is nobody and nothing more skilled than nature. When I made crutches from wood, it was not me who did it, but nature itself created them. I just took and cut off the excess. Or, for example, a hanger. I took about 10 pairs of stems, cut, processed them, and as the result, a hanger appeared. When creating a dombra, I imagine a tree and the back part of the dombra. Cut it off and make a dombra. It's great. According to you, when it is necessary to make a dombra, or for example, bisik, which tree species should be used?
Alma ağaçından керемет әдемі шығар. Қарағайдан ойып жасаса, қарағайдан жасаса, керемет. Оған ойының салудың жоқ, өрнек салудың керегі жоқ.
Mostly solid wood. The apple tree gives wonderful products. It only needs to be properly treated, varnished, and will be just fine. It has special patterns. Walnut is also good at it. In the direction of Shymkent, Chinara tree grows. So if dombra is made from this wood, it also has own very beautiful pattern. Or mahogany. Now the strongest dombra is mainly made of mahogany. And the cradles are mainly made from willow. I first started making them collapsible. Maybe previously masters practiced this, but I did not see it. I made some cradles and dombra. It was in the 90s. People bought them well then. For the girls, I did different boxes with all sorts of patterns, and they were quickly sold out.
Егемен Қазақстан қыздары сол кезде жасаған сайын бәрі солар алып тұратын.
Has the sound of the dombra today changed a lot?
Өзгерген домбраның. Қатты дыбысты көбірек қолданып жүрміз қазір.
The sound of the dombra has changed. Now we use tougher sounds. In general, the sound of dombra is the most wonderful sound for us. For example, when different instruments involved in the orchestra stop playing and the dombra starts playing, we feel it and get special impressions. This is our soul. It is transmitted to us through the blood. It is in our genes. What should the master never forget while working with wood? Dombra and kamcha. We now forget to make kamcha. We need to make more of it. Kamcha with the handle of the aureole fringed with Latin. Similar kamcha was made since ancient times. Of course, when creating objects of ancient life, they try to do them in a new way. Previously, for example, I made tabak, dish. And during its production, I noticed that the dishes that were made in the old days were deep. Why were they like that? Because they didn't cook with dough before. In the north, only meat was served in large pieces. That is why the dishes were so deep. And now, they should be flatter. And what other traditions do we forget? There is the concept of bisik keper. The reason why a lot is forgotten is that now there is no such thing. That the children who are lying in the cradle are wood. Simply no. What is a lullaby sign? This is when a baby is wood, and in this case a special sign is left on the bisik. And everyone who comes to visit sees it and immediately understands that the child is already engaged. One time, ethnographer Seyit Kenji Akhmetov thoroughly researched this tradition and even published several books.
Уақытыңызды бөліп бізге сұхбат.
Thank you for your conversation. Thank you.